This week on Hands-On Photography, remember that headshot discussion we had? Well, we're going to continue it with part 2, and we're going to dive into the post-processing of it, and we're going to really make those headshots pop, baby. Check it out. Hands-On Photography is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Using the same password everywhere is a security nightmare waiting to happen. LastPass easily creates unique passwords for every site. Visit lastpass.com/twit.
This is TWiT.
This episode of Hands-On Photography is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy with one click. Yes, it's that easy. For 3 extra months free with the 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/hop. Hey folks, I am Pruitt. This is Hands-On Photography here on TWiT.tv at the beautiful LastPass Studios. Hope y'all are doing well. Unbelievable. As always, we're recording just a little bit early because I have to travel to CES and figure out a way to wrangle Mr. Leo Laporte while we're out there and get all of this beautiful content about CES back to you all. So we're going to record this just a little bit early and make sure it hits your podcatchers right on time as it normally would each and every Thursday. So hop into your favorite podcatcher of choice, hit subscribe, and then do me a favor, hit the share button so other folks can check it out too. Hope y'all are doing all right. This is part 2 of our previous episode where we talked about the new year and getting started with some headshots, because there's nothing like getting a headshot on your profile for your resume or your social media, a comp card if you're into modeling and acting and things like that. It's just a great photograph to really set the tone and let people know who you are and what you're about. So I showed you some shots previously, and I said that this time we're going to take a look at those shots, and I'll walk through the post-processing that I would do for some, just for some people, because post-processing of headshots is a sensitive matter. You got people that want it to be a little more journalistic and sort of subdued on the post-processing, and then you'll have some other folks that want to be all glamorized, if you will. But again, that all depends on your client and what the message is that they're trying to present. But again, just go back to the previous episode of Hands-On Photography. Just go to twit.tv/hop and just go ahead and click watch right now. Okay. All right. But before we get started, I want to do a little bit of feedback. I got an email from Mr. Daniel Chavez, and I know I'm pronouncing that correctly because I asked him how to phonetically pronounce it. Boom, I'm learning something. How about that? He sent an email to let me know he's here in the LA area, and he shot a beautiful race car. Oh my goodness. He's able to get access to the racetrack and get really, really close to all of the action. And if you've ever assumed that you can just pull your camera out and take the picture of a moving car just going down your street, it's pretty hard. Now, think about that being a speeding race car going over 200 miles an hour. It is insanely difficult. But if you look at this image here, my goodness, Mr. Chavez, you nailed this shot. Such a great image, such a great way of showing implied motion. What impressed me about it, though, was the actual settings that he used to get this shot, because he sent the EXIF information to me. Okay, so he's shooting at f/22, and he's shooting at 1/60th of a second with an ISO of 100. All right, so we've talked about the exposure triangle in the past. You got your aperture, the f number, you have your ISO, and you have your shutter speed. Now, when I look at that f number, f/22, that means the aperture hole on the lens is closed down super duper tight. There's not a lot of light coming through. So I'm thinking he's probably going to have to speed up his shutter. That's why it's at 1/60th of a second. That's not terribly fast, and it's not terribly slow. The ISO is a little bit low, so that surprised me too, at 100. But then when I went back and looked at the image, that's a big, bright, sunny day. It's got a lot of light out there, so that f/22 works really well. And typically when you're shooting at an aperture that high, like f/22, you're going to get a lot of things in focus, not just the center of the frame. looking at this image from Mr. Chavez, the center of the frame is clearly in focus and the background is starting to blur out, but there's a reason for that. It's called 200 miles per hour. Man, this is a great job. He was able to just keep himself stable and pan while he's trying to capture the image and click the shutter while this image was moving. And it just beautifully locked the race car into focus and blurred out the background. That is an art and a skill in itself. So Mr. Chavez, I salute you. Very, very nice. Give him a follow over on Instagram. I believe it is It's Me, Danny C on Instagram. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Give him a follow over there. Show him some love and express your support on his page there. So thank you very much for that. Now, let's go ahead and hop back into my screen here and take a look at the photographs of choice this week. So I'm going to go back over here into Lightroom and I'm going to pull up the actual raw images that I shot. You know, when I showed them to you on the previous episode, what you saw was the post-processing. I figured I'm going to bring up the original ones to let you see where you're starting from, because sometimes you're going to have a lot of work to do in post-processing, and other times it's a piece of cake. With these, because of the way I shoot in what's called a neutral profile on my camera. That is basically telling the camera, keep the colors a little bit more muted, keep the lighting fairly natural, and don't try to outthink me as a photographer. A lot of times your camera will try to give you these vivid modes or portrait modes and things of that nature. Heck, even your smartphone would do that. Well, it'll just go through and try to analyze the scene for you and present back what it thinks it's supposed to look like. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. I found that when I set my DSLR to more of a flat profile, it allows me a lot more freedom in post-processing to either bring it back to what it really should look like, or even be super aggressive and push it beyond the limits, you know, and just make that post-processing a little bit wild and crazy and sometimes interesting. Your mileage may vary. Check your camera. For me, Canon is the way that I shoot, and Canon is very well known for their color science. Canon has a reputation of being a little more saturated with their images and also making their images look a little bit warmer from a color temperature standpoint. And again, your mileage may vary with Sony, Panasonic, Fujifilm, whatever it is you may be using. Just check it out in your manuals or the online forums that you are working with. All right, so back to my shot here. This is, again, I shot it in my home office, just found a wall in the office and lined her up and figured out what the message was, clicked the shutter, boom, we're good to go. Now, it's still a little bit soft. I want some more clarity on it. When you're shooting portraits, the key is to really get the eyes locked in on focus. And I think for the most part, if I zoom in, I did a good job with getting the eyes in focus. But when I zoom out, I don't think these eyes are popping enough. So I'm going to make a mental note to myself, work on the eyes. And then my next phase is I'm just going to do a general overall post-processing, making sure the actual exposure looks pretty good. It's not clipping on the highlights or anything like that. And if you look over here on the upper right of my screen, you will see this histogram is showing that it's slightly overexposed, allegedly, but that's only because this background is so white, and that's quite all right. I don't have to worry about it too much. But when I just eyeball it myself, I want to bring up the exposure just a touch because I think it's a little too dark. So I'm going to bring it up just a touch right here. There we go, but not too much. And that already is looking 200% better in my opinion. Now, but there's still some detail work that we're going to have to work with. I'm looking at her hair. I would like more information and more details in the hair because hair is personality. You know, makeup is personality, tattoos is personalities, facial expressions, hair. I want to use all of that in this image. So that's another mental note that we'll get to momentarily. The blacks and white levels in this, let's bring that down just a touch. Because when I bring the black levels down, we're going to bring some contrast to the image. This is going to give us some shadows around her face. Shadows around the face can be good and bad. In this instance, I want to use the shadows to bring out more details in her face. You know, the cheeks and the smile and the dimples. Those shadows are good to see. Take the highlights down just a touch. And I think that looks okay. I'm going to give it a little more saturation because, again, I shot it in a flat profile. So I'm going to push the saturation up just a touch to make her skin look a little more natural. Okay. Same with the vibrance here on this little slider. Okay, we're looking good now. Looking good. So overall, this thing looks pretty good to go. Now, that's just the start of post-processing headshots. The next thing you have to ask when you're interviewing your model, and when they're saying they want to do headshots, ask them some very, very specific questions. And I don't want this to sound sexist, especially when you're dealing with the female model. I have to let them know, look, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a lot of post-processing. I'm going to try to smooth some things out on your skin. There's some things I'm not going to touch. People take that quite personal, and in my experience, I really try to emphasize it to females because I don't want to offend anybody or make them feel bad about anything. So I tell them, as I'm looking through the shots, I would like to work on your cheekbones. I may try to smooth things out. If they have like a blemish on their skin, like maybe a little mole or pimple or something like that, that could be distracting, I'll let them know, hey, I will just take that out. Sometimes they're cool with it, sometimes they're not. There's even some instances where you have a person that says, you know what, my eyes are blue and I'm known for my blue eyes. Can you really bring out my blue eyes? So that means I have to go in and actually boost the saturation just on their eyeballs, not necessarily everything else, but they really want that to stand out. So that's something that you have to consider. Just, you got that interview with them to set up the headshot. Go over every single thing so there's no confusion. Understand what they're trying to present in the image, and be sure to let them know exactly what your thought process is when it comes to post-processing, okay? All right, before we get into that other nitty-gritty stuff of the post-processing, I want to take a few minutes to thank one of our proud sponsors here on TWiT.tv. This episode of Hands-On Photography is brought to you by ExpressVPN. A VPN protects your privacy and security online, right? Did you know that you could take your TV watching to the next level by unlocking movies and shows only available in other countries? Use ExpressVPN to binge on Doctor Who or Star Trek on the UK Netflix. It's simple. Just fire up the app, change your location to the UK, refresh Netflix, and that's it. Their apps use powerful encryption to secure your data. Download the app, click to connect, and you're protected. Visit my special link right now, expressvpn.com/hop, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Support the show, watch what you want, and protect yourself at expressvpn.com/hop. All right, thank you again, ExpressVPN, for your support. Okay, so we've gotten the little overall global adjustments done on this image. Let's take a few minutes and hop into the wonderful world of Photoshop and get into some nitty-gritty. So since I'm using Lightroom, I can just right-click on this, select Edit In, and take this over to Photoshop. And I'm going to tell it to think about all of the adjustments that I just did and send it over to Photoshop, not just the original raw file. Okay, so we'll click Edit. Photoshop's going to open up any minute now, any hour now. You can do it, Photoshop.
It's because you're watching.
Oh yeah, that's normally how it is. Okay, well let me just turn my head away and not watch. Hey, that's Mr. Victor and Mr. Brockman over there. Hey, oh, Photoshop's still loading. All right, now this is looking great. This is zoomed in way too much, so I need to zoom out just a touch. Okay, that's better. Now with Photoshop, folks, if you look over here on the right-hand side, and I don't want to make this a Photoshop tutorial just yet, but you'll notice you have this layer panel here, okay? And I like to take this layer and duplicate it because what happens is anything that I adjust on this particular layer is not going to affect this bottom layer, hence giving me a non-destructive editing process. Because sometimes you can go overboard in your post-processing and manipulation. And I don't know about you, but there's been a time or two where I would start working on something and I just go down a rabbit hole and I'm thinking, oh crap, I really need to just go back and fix this. And then you get to that point of no return, just turn off that layer. You still have your original layer there. Start over with a fresh set of eyes and just go from there. Okay, so edit non-destructively when you're using any of these apps if you possibly can. All right, so now back to Photoshop. I like to duplicate that layer, and the first thing that I would like to do is sharpen this image up just a touch. Okay, so I have a process of using what's called frequency separation. I'll break that down a little more as we go along. So I'm going to duplicate this layer yet again, like so. And I'm going to call this layer blur, which is my low frequency layer. And I'm going to call this layer sharp, which is my high frequency layer. And then to help me see it from a before and after standpoint, I like to group them together like so. And then I'll go ahead and start working. Photoshop has these tools, filters and adjustment layers and things like that. But one of my favorite tools is what's called a smart object tool. So I'm going to right click and say convert to a smart object. And what this does is it will allow me to work on this layer, make changes. And if it's something that I don't like, it makes it a little bit easier to go back and readjust it. So right now I'm going to add some blur to this layer, but if I add too much blur, I can easily hop back into it and say, back off on that blur just a little bit. Okay, so now you'll notice that the little icon changed to a smart object. And I'll do the same thing for this one, the sharp layer. You can right click to convert it, or you can go up to the filter menu and there's an option in there that says convert to smart object. Same thing. I typically like to use right click and keyboard shortcuts to make things faster for me, especially since Photoshop likes to sit here and think longer than I want to. All right, so that's done. Now in the interim, I'm going to turn off this sharp layer by clicking on this little eyeball icon. I'm going to turn that off so that's not visible at this time. What's visible is this blur layer and this one, but you could barely see it because the blur layer is on top of it. So now I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to this image, and how I'm going to use this is part of the skin softening process. So I'll select filter, blur, Gaussian blur. All right. And there's a couple of ways to do the frequency separation process. This is what I found to be the easiest way to do it, as far as explaining it to others so they can learn how to do it. So that's why I'm doing it this way. Okay, so now if you look at it, I'm going to push this blur all the way up and you'll see what happens to it. We don't want that. So I'm going to take it all the way back to the beginning. What we want to do is just soften it just a touch. And what I've found is it gets just about right around 5, anywhere between 5 and 7. I'm going to soften it up a little more. Right about there, okay? And we'll click OK. So now if I was to compare this layer here to the original layer, you'll see the difference once I turn it off. So it's a little bit sharper now, and this is just a little bit softer. It's not super blurry, but it's just a little bit softer. Next, we'll move up to our sharp layer. And again, we're going to add a filter to it called the high pass filter. So we'll go to the filter menu, other, high pass filter. And then your screen is going to freak out and turn gray, just like that. That is totally okay. This particular tool is used to help sharpen edges on your image. You don't want to use sharpening on everything in your image. For example, if I was shooting a landscape that had clouds in it, I don't want my clouds sharpened. Leave the clouds soft and puffy. This filter sort of helps eliminate over sharpening everything. It just checks for edges and contrast in your image. And the trick with using this high pass filter is, again, turn it all the way off to where you don't see anything. And I like to start to get it where it just barely shows my subject through on the gray, right about here. Let's start there. And then you click OK. And now you're thinking, but boy, what am I supposed to do with that? It's just this gray screen. Yeah, it's a gray screen because the blending mode of this layer is not quite right. It's set to normal. When you're using this particular filter, you have to change it to linear light, like so. So now I have all of that stuff changed. I have that blurred layer and the high pass filter layer, and I'm going to compare it to this original layer here. And the only way that I can do that is just turn it off. So I'm going to turn off what we just did so you can see the before and after. So this is the after and this is the before. You probably can't see it on the stream, but if I were to zoom in a little bit more, you'll be able to notice the detail in the eye just a touch better. So I'm going to turn the detail back on like that. Did you notice that? Look right here at the specular highlight in particular. So I'm going to turn it off and then we'll turn it back on. Much better detail. I could actually add a little more. So I'm going to zoom out and work on this some more. We'll go back to our high pass filter, double click on it because it's a smart object. It allows me to open it right back up. And I'm going to add just a little bit more. Let's go there. Click OK. And then we'll do another compare and contrast. So let's turn it off. That's before. I'll zoom in. This is the before version. And this is the after version. And that's a lot sharper. Granted, that does not look good zoomed in that much, but it shouldn't look great zoomed in that much. But it does show you that there is detail here, and that high pass filter really does pull it out. Now, again, we didn't want to affect sharpness on her cheeks, okay? We should try to smooth out her skin just a little bit. And with Photoshop, you have the beauty of what's called layer mask that will allow you to hide the sharpness in certain spots and bring that soft blurry layer to the forefront. So what I'll do is click on my sharp layer right here, and then I'll click this little layer mask icon. And then I'm going to pull out my trusty Wacom Tablet because it gives me a little bit more control when it comes to trying to fine-tune detail and brush things in when I'm dealing with portraiture. And I got to tell you, Wacom Tablets is probably one of the best investments that I made for my photo processing. You can get them ranging anywhere from $1,500 all the way down to this one being well under $100. I think I got this one for maybe $70. And it's super duper portable. It's Bluetooth connected. We'll put some links to one of these in the show notes. I highly recommend it. You can throw it in your backpack and travel with it and get work done pretty easily. All right, so we'll go ahead and brush on this image just a touch. All right, so now I'm going to use the brush tool that's over here on this left menu. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And I'm going to paint with black on her cheekbones, okay? And when I do that, you'll notice it's going to blend in a little softer skin, like so. And you don't want to do it everywhere, just sort of pick and choose to figure out what looks best. And ideally, I like to go along the contours, the natural contours of the face. And as I'm looking at this, that last part right here, that's a little bit too much. I'll show you how to fix that. Just brush it in slightly. And again, with the Wacom tablet, it's pressure sensitive. So I could press down really hard if I need to, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to undo that. And you can also change your brush opacity up here at the top, this top menu here. I like to back it down a little bit because if you have it full bore, you might overdo it. So like right there, that's really overdoing it. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to take it back to anywhere between 50 and 75%, something like that. So we'll just brush away just a little bit to soften up her skin. And when you come to problem areas like this area here that I overdid, instead of painting with black on that layer mask, paint with white. The white color is going to reveal the sharp layer. So I'll just hit X on my keyboard and I'll paint it back in. So now you'll notice the detail is starting to come back as I paint it back in. And then I can say, all right, let me do this the right way. I'll go back to painting with a black brush. And this time, I won't press as hard. I'll just lightly do it, just to soften it up, like so. And just move around on the screen. Pick and choose where you want this skin to really just be soft and more flattering to your model. Like so. Because sometimes those details are good to see because it gives you a little bit of character. You don't want to overdo it. This process that you're seeing right now is called the frequency separation. That sharp layer is what's the high frequency. That blur layer is the low frequency. And when you look at your smartphone photography today, all of that computational smartphone photography is trying to emulate frequency separation by finding the perfect mix of tones in the low frequency, the blur layer, and high frequency with detail and edge detection. So we'll just do this nice and easy, like so. Okay, so that's enough on that. And I think that looks a lot better on her face. It's a lot more flattering, makes her look a little more youthful, which is never a bad thing, right? Right, Mr. Victor?
Right.
He's like, I'm not touching that one. Nope. So we got that done. That's all of the actual touch-up, if you will. So now we can get back into some of the other details that I typically look at. So I'm going to take this group layer here, and I'm going to put my Wacom tablet down for the moment because I don't think I need it at this time. And I'm just going to right-click on this group and merge all of those layers together in the group so I can work on this as its own layer. And again, I don't want to be destructive. I'm going to duplicate it so I can be non-destructive. All right, so I can just say orig ready 1, just in case I need to revert back to that. So now let's have some fun with some of the manipulation here. If you zoom in really close, do you see what I see right here? That little bit of silver gray hair. Some people like that, most people don't. So we're going to utilize the magical tool in Photoshop. It's just a healing brush. So I'm going to click over here, or just use J on the keyboard and select the spot healing brush like so. And with this tool, I can make it really, really big like that, or I can shrink it down to fit whatever I'm working with. So I'm just going to get rid of that gray hair. Just like that. Even this little speck here. And again, base it on your model and what their expectations are. Some people wouldn't have mattered about that one gray hair. Me, I personally did, and I think I know her better than anybody else. I know she cares too. So I wanted to get rid of it. And again, I'll sort of navigate on the screen and make sure I don't see anything else. For example, there's this little mole right here. Let's just get rid of that. Just tap it, it's gone. Same there. Just wipe that away. Okay, so that's a lot of the touch-up stuff or photo finishing processes that you'll see this day and age in photography. Another thing to consider, especially with ladies, ladies are pretty sensitive about their neckline. They want their necks to look flattering and not have any type of blemishes or things like that. And I can be open about this. She has had neck surgery in the past, so she has this little bit of a scar going right there. And of course, she's sensitive about it, so I want to do what I can to try to, you know, just take it away just a touch, but yet make it look natural. try to take it away some. I'm gonna undo because that didn't work out as well as I'd like. And when you zoomed in, it's gonna look really, really weird, but it's really best to work on these things when you're zoomed in really tight. And when you zoom out, it starts to look a lot more natural. See? Looks a lot better. So this is the before. I'll zoom in a little bit. And this is the after. No gray hair, skin looks a lot better, lighting's good to go. All right. So now I think I'm done with Photoshop on this. There's some other things that I would like to do, but I won't bore y'all with those just yet. I'm going to take this back into Lightroom and finish this up. And it's only going to take a few seconds because Lightroom has almost as many tools as Photoshop when it comes to photo manipulation. And it does have a adjustment brush tool that makes using a mouse or a Wacom tablet like this one really, really useful. So I'm going to hit save inside of Photoshop. And this is going to take it back to Lightroom after I close Photoshop. So I'm going to hit close. And it should take me back to Lightroom. And there it is. So now this is the new image that we just finished working on inside of Photoshop. Remember earlier we talked about I wanted to have some extra detail in her hair because I still feel like hair is just part of the personality. And I could have done all of that inside of Photoshop, but it was a lot more steps versus doing it inside of Lightroom. Very easy tip. Lightroom has what's called an adjustment brush right here, or you can just click K on your keyboard to activate it. And it gives you this additional menu, okay? And it says effects right there. Click on that menu and you got all of these different effects. And the beauty of it is this is not a global effect that you're going to change. This is going to be something localized. So what I want to do is give us a little more texture and clarity on our hair. So let's start with clarity. And then you just drop a little pin somewhere for your own reference. And then you just paint in some more clarity where you want the clarity to be. And I'm just going to paint it in on our hair like that. And if you have a hard time seeing where you're painting, there's this little overlay tool or this mask tool down here that says show the mask overlay. Click that and that shows you where you paint it, and it shows up in red. And there's also these extra tools over here to show the density and flow of the brush, just like you had in Photoshop. So I'm just going to paint a little bit more right there on her hair. Great. And then when you want to get rid of that overlay, just check that little box or just hit O on your keyboard. So you're thinking, man, you painted on this hair, but I don't see much of a difference. Well, just go over there to your slider. Make it show up just a little more. Adjust that clarity. Adjust that texture. And you'll see the difference in her hair. Adjust the sharpness too if you want. So now her hair is really standing out. Actually, that's a little too sharp. There we go. Now her hair is really standing out. A lot more detail. This is a before and an after. The before is over here and this is the after. Notice the difference in the hair. A lot more detail, a lot more sheen to it, if you will. All right. And lastly, the smile in the eyes. A lot of times our models will have big smiles on their face, but their teeth aren't always white. It happens. Why not whiten their teeth? It's if you're going to be smiling on this big old billboard, you want your teeth to look nice, right? So we'll go ahead and take advantage of that. I discuss that with the models each and every time I've had to do a shot. And you don't want to overdo it. You want to, there's sometimes you'll look at a photo and you can tell someone really whitened their teeth, you know. you gotta find the line of, you know, that works just right for it. So again, we're going to use another adjustment brush. And we'll just click new. And the beauty of this tool, because I know how to do it without Lightroom's little cheat sheet in here, but Lightroom has a teeth whitening. Uh-oh, cancel that. Didn't want to preset. I hit my mouse over here. Lightroom has a little teeth whitening tool already built in. And when you click on it, you notice all it's doing is taking whatever area that you're painting and it's desaturating it, taking the color out of it. And it's also adding a little bit of exposure to it. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in more because it's going to be a lot easier to paint and make her teeth look a little bit wider. So I'm going to drop a pin there for my reference. And you can make your brush larger, which I don't recommend for this particular shot, or you can make it smaller and just paint it in. And just spend some time on the details. Just paint it in. Like so. Now, sometimes you'll screw up and paint somewhere else that you don't want to, and I'll show you what happens when you do that. Let's say I did it on her lips. And I'm looking at her teeth and I'm like, man, her teeth aren't quite white enough. So I want to take that exposure up a little bit. So her teeth are starting to look better, but holy moly, what happened to her lip? You paint it there too. That's the beauty of having, you know, selective adjustment areas instead of being global. You can really just focus on whatever it is your particular subject matter is at that time. So let me go ahead and fix this mistake right here. All you have to do is hold down your Alt key on Windows. I think it's Alt Option on Mac. Hold that down and you can erase what you did. And if you can't see it, remember we always have that little overlay earlier, and just erase what you did. Because you're human, you're going to screw up here and there. Everybody's not as perfect as Aunt Pruitt. I know this. All right, so we fixed that up. That's good to go. That looks much better. Her teeth look a lot better. I also like to do this with the eyes because sometimes people have sort of bloodshot eyes. Just, it is what it is. They might have some liver problems or something. I don't know. But you can do the same technique with the eyes. So I'm going to zoom in like so. Real tiny brush. Whites of her eyes aren't really showing much in this image, but I'm just going to do this for the tutorial sake anyway. Like so. And that will really help bring out some detail in the eyes. So I'm going to pop out so I get a better look. I'm going to crank the exposure. And you see the whites of her eyes will start to pop out just a little bit more. But did you notice what else happened? Right here next to my little anchor point, it started to change the exposure there. We don't want that. So I'm going to hit O, hold down my Alt key, and I'm going to erase what Lightroom tried to add, because I didn't do that. But you notice she has these red spots around her eyes now. That's just where I brushed in the additional exposure. So I'm going to hit O, and now her eyes look a lot better. And then you can just turn that off. If you feel like doing a little bit of cropping, you can. It's no biggie. Just crop it down. Take some of this headroom away. Like that. Let's go down and give it a little bit of a vignette right here in the menu, because that vignette really puts the focus on your subject like that. Boom. So that is the after. Let's take a look at the before right here. This is the before. And this is the after. A lot cleaner, a lot sharper, more details. Her eyes are popping. That smile is popping. Woo! She's ready to take on the world, folks. Know what I'm saying? All right. That is it. That is headshots, getting started with it. A quick overview of going through and trying to do the post-processing on it. Again, the big things with these headshots is, first and foremost, figure out what their message is. What's the message that they're trying to present with their headshots? Because headshots could either look like a headshot or it could look like a mugshot. It's up to you as the photographer, okay? We don't want people looking like mugshots. We don't want people looking like they're at the DMV. We want a nice, beautiful message, beautiful picture that's just gonna make them shine, all right? So go through your interview process, work on your post-processing skills. I hope all of this stuff has been helpful for you and can get you squared away and down the road to creating some awesome headshots. All right. Thank you all for hopping in this week and just continuing to support the show. Continue to hit the share button when you watch these episodes and listen to them. It really does help us out, and just spread the word about hands-on photography. And also check out all the other shows here on our network. Just go to TWiT.tv and click on the shows option, and you're going to see there's a ton of shows that we're doing here on the network, from iOS stuff, from Mac stuff to Windows stuff. Yes, people use Windows. I use Windows. We have a whole lot of different varieties of shows that you all can check out. And then if you're feeling like just chatting with us and stuff, hop on over to our online forums. That's twit.community in your browser, and you can check out our online forum and chat with me and other Twit Army members, chat with our other hosts, talk about the shows, talk about whatever you feel like talking about, how fun this particular demo was for you to see. You can go on over there and talk about that. I don't mind. And we have a lot of fun in that Twit community. It's some pretty good conversations over there. All right. Now, Mr. Victor, as always, I appreciate you hopping in. Is there anything that you'd like to add about that headshot? Anything, any notes?
No, I think it looks great.
Okay.
And I want to thank you, because in a way, I thought I was both doing something wrong when I was taking pictures, that I wasn't getting them as sharp as I'm seeing in magazines. And on the post-processing side, I was thinking I was working too hard also, but it's really nice to see another way of getting
It's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bunch of different ways to do it. That frequency separation stuff, if you just hopped into Google or the Brave browser and put in frequency separation, you'll see tons and tons of stuff. But I felt like this is the way to better approach it, especially for people that are just getting started. And, you know, I tried to simplify it just a little bit.
Oh, definitely. Like what you accomplished on yours would take me like layers and layers and layers of layer masks. So, yeah.
Sweet.
So thanks.
I helped somebody out. That's what's up, baby. Woo! All right, Twit Army, thank you all so much for joining us this week. This has been fun. Again, stay tuned for more shows here on twit.tv. We're going to do HOP, hands-on photography, every week. That's Thursday at about 2 p.m. Pacific time-ish if you want to watch us live. So just go to live.twit.tv and hop into the chat room. Chat room, I love you folks. You're always so supportive. Thank you for all the kind messages in there. Okay, so until next time, I'm Ant Pruitt. Y'all get on out there, create, and dominate. We'll see you.